All right, peeps. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hatman Strikes Back, Daily Boxing News. How you guys doing? Impromptu live stream. There is a fight on right now, which I did not intend to watch, but I do have the stream up. George Liddard versus Morello. What do you guys think of Liddard? Shout out to everybody in the live chat. Let me know if you can hear me loud and clear. We got Matt Borgerson early with a super chat. He says, can I ask what's up with the absolute disrespect of Rolando Romero? Will he have to get respect for this win tonight, or will people just hate Tio? So you're picking Romero to win? The thing about Romero is he's one of these guys that doesn't look the most technically polished. I think that's part of why people, including myself, have underestimated him over the years. But also because of the way he comes across. You know, he doesn't come across like the sharpest knife in the drawer. And thirdly, because he has lost some big fights in the past, right? He lost to Barroso. In fact, no, he didn't lose to Barroso. He beat Barroso, excuse me. But he beat Barroso in controversial fashion, right? He obviously lost to Tank Davis. So when it comes to fighting the elite guys, that's when people tend to pick against Romero. But obviously he did beat Ryan Garcia, but Ryan Garcia is known for being a little unpredictable, unreliable, inconsistent. Big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, that Mitchell kid was actually quite good. Good to have Matt Borgerson back aboard. Ain't seen you for a few lives, bro. Hope you've been keeping well. Wow, Matt Borgerson is saying Romero by KO over Teofimo Lopez. You know, Lopez, I don't want to say he got a beating against Shakur Stevenson, but it was a one-sided fight and it was quite humiliating. So psychologically, it might have taken something out of him rather than physically. Does that make sense? Big up Matt Borgerson every time. Shout out to Sam. He likes the 80s retro background tunes, as do I. Big up Sam. Shout out to Isaac Blings. David Fisher, The Last Romany. Says I might break out my Mega Drive and play some Streets of Rage. Now this particular image that you're seeing on screen right now, do you guys know what the inspiration for this image was? It's a video game. This one is not as easy to tell as the previous ones were. Shout out to Joe Slynn, KO Kid, Julius, JR, Gordon Dalglish, Chili Beef, Shay Turnbull, The Shed, FIFA Jr., The Biakar Fault Line, Matt Jukes, Stereo Broadcast Boxing, WPW, Striker, big up Striker. We got Ben in the house, we got Paris Allen, Dominica, GMS Nightmare, big up. Jack Hammer, Sazad, Ocean Blue in the house, Lewis Spencer, Tony S. No, not Tekken. That's right. Walker Shack got it. It's M. Bison. It's Hatman as M. Bison. Correct. Rich Franklin says, I hope Rolly wins. I find him hilarious and he's not trying to be. You know, Rolly Romero Yeah, that's right, Matt. Rolly got caught by Barboza in round 7 and hurt, and it was a controversial ending because it was a very premature stoppage in Romero's favor. I remember that fight. We got Matt for the super chat. He says, it would be cool for Rolly to win because it takes away from Shakur too, makes him actually fight more competition to prove his skill set. Like Debo. That's a great comment, Matt. You know, Shakur has been talking extra smoky for a while. But when it comes down to fighting people, he starts talking about catch weights. You know, people that we really want to see him fight. He starts talking about catch weights. He's trying to go down the Tank Davis route. Catch weight this, catch weight that. We got possibly on the P's. Shout out to Tall Man. Yeah, very well aware of the original M. Bison and the original Street Fighter boss names. In the Japanese version, as I understand it, they kept the original versions of the names. It's only for the Western market that they had the other names. But yeah, as Matt says there, with regards to Shakur Stevenson, if Rolly Romero beats Teofimo Lopez, and let's say he does it as comfortably or more comfortably than Shakur did, it will put pressure on Shakur to start fighting some people. Disappointing the way he didn't go through with the Devin Haney fight. That's right, Rich Franklin. Vega was the original name for Bison. Balrog was the original name for what we know as Vega. And Bison was, of course, what we now know as Balrog. M. Bison, it was two on the nose. Mike Tyson, M. Bison, you know. So they had to change it. Tallman says, what do you reckon to George Izzard, Hatman? Well, George Liddard, I've never really paid any attention to him, to be honest. That's why I wanted to ask you guys about George Liddard. What do you think of him? Is he actually world-class and really good? I know he's got a belt. But is he like a lucky fighter, right place, right time, such as Darren Barker, for example? Or is he like a real, proper, legit world-level fighter? You guys let me know what you think. And let's sort out this connection. You having connection issues, I will switch over to my backup connection, which is probably better, to be fair. Big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, that win would have been the difference between an 8-figure payday to 9 for Shakur. Beating Devin Haney would be a De La Hoya kind of win for Floyd. I hear you. And ultimately, why do you think he didn't take the fight, Matt? Shakur Stevenson, that is. Why didn't he fight Devin Haney? Because Devin Haney agreed to the 144 catch weight. My best guess is that Shakur was on some cross the street BS. You know, whereby Haney would have had to sign with Zuffa to make the fight happen. You know, like PBC used to do back in the days. Cross the street. The fight can't happen if you don't cross the street. You know, all that BS. All right, somebody else, somebody did this the other night. I want to say a couple of weeks back. They kept saying that Luke Partridge had been arrested in Preston. Luke Partridge arrested in Preston near the airport. Does Preston even have an airport? I've been to Preston. It's a very small town. Does it have an airport? I don't think it's got a commercial airport. Or is there something there for like private jets or something? Shout out to Deb Yacker. He says, did you like Aaron Pryor? I wasn't a massive Aaron Pryor fan. I mean, he was kind of shut out, left in the cold. Obviously, I liked his win over Alexis Arguello. That was an impressive win. But I wasn't a particularly big fan of his style. He was kind of scrappy and what have you. I tend to like fighters that punch really cleanly. Yeah, big up Chili Beef. Matt Borgerson says it's risk. That's why Shakur didn't take it. Devin Haney is good. Big up Matt for the super chat. He says, Devin Haney is golden poo, in my opinion. The most unathletic athlete I've ever seen in sports. Like, I don't know how he's like that. Anyone more athletic wins versus him. And you know what? I've seen Devin Haney in person. I've seen him training in person. And that's the same impression I got when I saw him like up close, is that he's not particularly athletic. I mean, he's in shape, but he's not like a really snappy, fast puncher. And I said this before, and it will sound wild to people because I'm a heavyweight, right? But when I was watching Devin Haney hit the bag, I was literally like, I'm faster than this in terms of hand speed. I'm not talking about foot speed and overall agility, but in terms of hand speed, my hands are faster than Devin Haney's hands. Again, that sounds wild because he's a welterweight and my heavyweight, but I'm telling you, I can move my hands a lot faster than that. So yeah, he is not the most athletically gifted guy, but that's why I respect Haney, because his contemporaries are all more gifted than he is. T.O. has got way faster hands. Same with Shakur. Same with Tank. Definitely the same with Ryan Garcia. I mean, these guys are way more explosive and faster and just better athletes than he is. But somehow Haney is the one who wants all the smoke. You know? We got Matt Borges and he says, wouldn't surprise me if he's on the spectrum. Look at his social skills. Did dad his anchor? Do you mean his dad is his anchor? I mean, it's hard to know because obviously the spectrum is a spectrum. In other words, some people are more autistic than others. He doesn't come across as obviously on the spectrum to me, Devin Haney, but you never know. We got Matt Borgerson. Telstar says, what makes Haney so good then? He's got a good boxing brain. He's incredibly physically fit. He trains ridiculously hard. And he does have skills. He's got a certain degree of athleticism. He's not like, you know, the worst athlete you've ever seen at welterweight, but I'm comparing him to his contemporaries, his rivals. Compared to them, he's got nowhere near the type of athleticism that they have. Like when you see Teofimo Lopez, for example, hitting the bag or even hitting pads, his punches are so fast and sharp. Do you know what I mean? You know you're dealing with an elite athlete. Who had the better overall career, Tony or Jones? I'd say Roy Jones. Well, Tony didn't have all the knockout defeats, right? But if you're talking about the wins, Roy Jones had the better overall career in terms of wins. But yeah, he went terribly downhill after that second Tava fight. Big up Sazad. Let's get the likes up, folks. Thank you in advance. Yes, correct, WPW. Haney does have an elite mindset. Jumper says Aaron Pryor Jr. used to comment on your videos years back. Are you sure it was the real Aaron Pryor Jr.? Indeed, clean living. That's another thing with Haney. He's a clean liver. He's not a guy that's out partying and doing all the extra stuff that Ryan Garcia and Tank Davis and some of the others are doing. But again, he has to be a clean liver because he doesn't have the talent that they have, you know? Doesn't have the natural talent and athleticism that they have. You know, if you're not as gifted as your rivals, then yeah, as Matt's saying, you got to work on those technical skills. You got to be the cleanest liver. You got to develop that ring IQ. Matt says Devin is also a bigger name than people think. Casuals know him. Arco says, Hatman, what do you think of Ward as a boxing personality? He's a bit dull, to be honest. Yeah, I've seen a couple of episodes of his podcast thing, but I don't tune in regularly, to be honest, because I find him quite boring. As you say, it plays it safe and not that interesting. So Rosby says he can't stand Devin. I'm not sure why. He didn't want any part of Shakur. I don't see how he didn't want any part of Shakur when he literally agreed to everything Shakur said, apart from joining Zuffa. And with Ryan Garcia, yeah, he got battered by a man who missed weight and was on PEDs. Why would you hate him for being battered by a guy who missed weight and was on PEDs? How is it that you can get in there with a cheat and you come out as the villain when you show loads of heart and all that? It don't make any sense to me. And as far as Loma, there was no gift decision. It was a close fight. It's like with the Hrgovic-Zhang fight. People said, oh, it was a robbery. It was no robbery. Go back and watch it. It's a close fight. Big up Deb Yaka for the super chat. He says, what single aspect of boxing can take you the furthest? Power punching, the jab. It really depends on your height and reach, chin, defense, you know? So for example, if you're someone that has got no chin and no defense, but a good jab, you're not gonna go far, are you? If you're someone that's got no chin, no defense, but you're a big puncher, it really depends on how brave you are. So it's a difficult thing to answer, but, and also what weight class you're in. I would say if you really learn how to use, if you've got a really exceptional jab and the rest of your game is solid rather than exceptional, then that exceptional jab will probably take you further than power. I can say that to answer your question. Big up Deb Yaka for the super chat. Because you look at Larry Holmes wasn't really exceptional in terms of power, speed. He had good skills, He had a decent chin. The stamina was there. The one exceptional thing about Larry Holmes, other than his heart, was his jab. So I got there in the end. I would say probably the jab, as long as the rest of your game is pretty solid. And that's the advice I always give people, because from time to time I get people asking for my advice ahead of their first amateur bouts. And I always say, keep your hands up and focus on landing your jab, because the other guy's going to come out probably swinging for the fences, leaving himself open all over the place, falling off balance. Just tuck up nice and tight, block where you can block, use your footwork to get out of the way of punches, and stick to the jab. And when you're fighting a fellow novice, that'll often be the difference between winning and losing. Who stays more calm, keeps their defense tight, and sticks to the straight shots, particularly the jab. Big up Jake Jones. He says, yo, Hatman, was just listening to TalkSport and Joyce is coming back. Jug Ears and Davis was saying he's still got plenty to give. Oh my God. Joyce needs to pack it in, seriously. I hope his mom's telling him to pack it in. Matt Borgerson says, Hatman, was Ward really that good? I never watched boxing at that time. Yeah, Ward was very good. I always compared him to like a more athletic version of Bernard Hopkins. So he wasn't good to watch. He wasn't an entertaining fighter to watch. He had a kind of ugly style. He had a very, very good boxing brain, like Hopkins. You know, a really cream of the crop, elite of the elite boxing brain. But he used that boxing brain to good effect, but it incorporated a lot of, I guess, Hopkins-style dirty boxing, footwork, offbeat rhythm, and all that kind of business. I always said he was Hopkins 2.0. That's the way I always saw Andre Ward. He's like a more athletic version of Hopkins. Fought in a very similar way. Tony Yes says, I have a horrible feeling Hrgovic will inexplicably fight in a way he's not accustomed to, fighting in fear of his eye opening up and the boxing establishment not giving him a fair shake. So you think he's going to fight defensively? What do you think, though, Deb Yucker, about the single aspect in boxing that can take you the furthest? Shout out to GMS Nightmare. He says, Haney versus Porter, Spence versus Boots at 147. Or excuse me, Haney versus Spence, Porter, Spence, Boots. I'd take all of those guys over Haney. At 147. I think they'll all be a bit too strong for him. Debiaka says, look how far Wilder went with power. I got to say that. He went far, but ultimately he was beaten by Luke Partridge, who doesn't have that kind of power. And Wilder never really came across somebody that had a really exceptional jab. Fury's got a good jab, but it's nothing exceptional. It's not like an all-time great jab or anything. He uses it in different ways and often flicks with it and uses it as a distraction, but sometimes he can stick it with resolution. He uses the jab in different ways, but, you know, it's an educated jab. Matt says, did you hear that Rolly apparently wobbled Boots in sparring for this fight? I didn't hear that. Wouldn't surprise me though, the way that Boots likes to slug it out. Bruno Smith says, AJ is mentally gone. Drew McKenzie said it in a recent interview. Well, I think most of us could see for years that AJ was mentally gone. I don't think we need Drew McKenzie to tell us that. It's been quite obvious, but I did see the Drew McKenzie interview that I think you're referring to or alluding to, where he was in the gym. And that was a very, very interesting interview because Drew McKenzie talked about the night when he got knocked out for the first time in his career and how traumatic it was, what the experience felt like, and how it affected him moving forward. All right, Lidard is getting rid of this guy. We barely talked about the fight. He's bashed him up. What are we on, round 8? He's dropped the guy. This fight's about to be over, I think, but there's only 25 seconds left in round number 8. Lidard going for the finish. On this Morello chap. I'll get back to the Duke McKenzie thought in just a second. Big up Matt Borgerson for the super chat. He says, the fight that nobody talks about that I want to see is, God, how do you pronounce his first name? Yanili Hernandez versus Boots at 161 day. That's a war. Big up Matt Borgerson. FIFA Junior says, who else is fed up with the Saudi involvement in boxing? That's a strange question. Why would you be fed up with the Saudi involvement in boxing? Well, maybe the Zuffa thing, I guess. Is that what you're talking about? Because overall, the Saudis have been fantastic for boxing. And if they hadn't been involved, we wouldn't have seen half the fights we ended up seeing. Matt says, look him up. He's a problem, not going to lie. I will look him up. No, I don't know him. I think you've mentioned him before, actually, Matt, but I don't think I actually looked him up. If I have seen him, then I've forgotten his name, if that makes sense. Like, I might recognize him if I saw him. So Lidard gets the W. Anyway, big up Matt Borgerson. And getting back to my Duke McKenzie thought. So for those of you who are unaware, Duke McKenzie did an interview. I forget which YouTube channel it was on. In fact, let me switch up the connection here because this connection's bothering me, even if it ain't bothering you guys. Doing my head in. Let me switch to a more stable internet connection here. This one's trash. If it cuts out for a second, don't worry. I'll be back in just a brief moment. Okay, we should be back with a more stable connection now. Sorry about that. Okay, he's fighting tonight, says Matt, on the pay-per-view. You'll get to see him tonight on the undercard. All right. But yeah, regarding Duke McKenzie's interview that he did on one of those boxing YouTube interview channels, I'm not sure if it was Seconds Out or Boxing King Media, one of them. And yeah, he was describing the first time he ever got knocked out. It was at the Royal Albert Hall. At this point, McKenzie was a vet. He'd had 7 world title fights. I think the fight where he got knocked out for the first time was his 8th. And he was expected to win. He was up against some Latino guy that wasn't that experienced. And he got clipped. He went down in the first round. He got back up. The guy jumped on him and knocked him out cold. And McKenzie said that he described the experience of being knocked out cold. That was the first time he'd been knocked out. And he said, obviously everything went dark. He lost consciousness. Then he started to come to, And he said it was like seashells. You know when you put your ear to a seashell, let's say you hear the sound of the ocean? He said everything was black and he kind of heard that noise, and that's obviously the crowd. And as he came to, he said he felt terrible pain in the back of his head. Now, if you watch that knockout, he doesn't hit the canvas particularly hard. Like the back of his head doesn't hit the canvas particularly hard, but you're dealing with neurology. And so a knockout will affect people differently. And for him, he felt terrible searing pain in the back of his head. And that's what he remembers when he came to from that, because he was out cold for, I think, several minutes. When he came to, he just had this terrible pain in the back of his head and an overwhelming feeling of humiliation. And this is what I spoke about in a couple of recent streams, that most fighters are not really afraid of being knocked out. They're afraid of the humiliation. They're afraid of being humiliated. And so Duke McKenzie said that after that knockout defeat, he didn't come out of his house for like, I think he said something like 2 months. He was so embarrassed and so humiliated after being knocked out cold like that in an upset in front of thousands of people at the Royal Albert Hall and however many people watching on television. He just felt so ashamed that he didn't even want to go outside. He couldn't show his face. And he said once he got back in the ring and had another fight, shout out to Danny Puravida, he said that the ring walk was so terrifying for him after that experience where he got knocked out that he nearly wet himself on the way to the ring. He was so terrified. Right? And even now, this is how much he was traumatized by the knockout defeat. He was so traumatized that to this very day, he's never actually watched the fight. He doesn't know what knocked him out, whether it was a left hook, right hand, uppercut. He doesn't know. He's never watched it. See, fans can somehow get this notion in their head that fighters are just robots and things like that don't bother them or shouldn't bother them. Well, in many cases, I want to say most cases, those things do bother them a lot, right? They're human beings at the end of the day, and these things can leave psychological scars. Not every fighter is like a Dylan White or a Derek Chisora, who seem like they're able to get over these things very easily, or much easier than most. They're very mentally robust guys. Most fighters are not like that, you know? Most fighters are bothered deeply by being knocked out. Shout out to FIFA Junior for the super chat. He says, with Ortiz going to 160, is he ducking boots? I don't think so. I think that he realizes that he is going to have to wait his turn with boots, because as Eddie Hearn said, yesterday's price is not today's price. And that's fair enough. Boots is going to prioritize, and Boots already signed for the Ortiz fight. The fight didn't happen, and it was no fault of Boots or Eddie Hearn. It was because of Ortiz having an issue with De La Hoya. That's why the fight didn't happen. So Boots is like, well, that's your problem, that's not mine. I'm going to get on with my career. He went and beat Xander Zayas. And now he's going to target unifications at 154. So Boots realizes he's basically gone to the back of the line. And he's a big guy, as I understand it, at 154. So he's thinking, let me go up to 160. Maybe he sees it as like, maybe easy pickings at 160. Maybe he sees it as a weak division. But I'll tell you what, somebody that really surprised me and has really impressed me has been Carlos Adames at 160. And, you know, you got Denzel Bentley there. You got Erislandy Lara, who's like 100 years old. So big up FIFA Junior for the super chat. Danny Boy says, speaking of Duke McKenzie, did you see that he said Dubois would be all wrong for a time? Yeah, I did see that. I don't agree with him on that. Matt says, Adame's loss to the Texiera guy could have been a fluke loss. I heard he had pneumonia in that fight. Yeah, could be. Big up FIFA Junior. He says, after watching the Zayas fight, Ortiz stops Boots. I'm still actually picking Boots in that fight. Because Ortiz has been down himself. Remember when he fought Boachuk? He was down a couple times in that fight. One of the knockdowns wasn't called. The other one was called. Ortiz is generally a more responsible fighter than Boots. I don't like when Boots just starts banging it out in the pocket for no apparent reason. He does have the ability and the skills to keep things long, just like he showed against Stanionis. He can box at long range and win more cleanly. But for some reason, he and his dad have got this macho Philly Jim thing where they feel like they need to outman the other guy. And if he does that against Ortiz, yeah, he could get knocked out. 100%. So it's a very, very interesting fight. But I'm still kind of leaning towards Boots. But if he fights a really reckless fight, then yeah, he could get KO'd himself. I agree. I think he needs to leave his dad. What? Matt says Bradis Prescott on tonight's undercard. What? Bradis Prescott is still fighting? All right, somebody sending shots at Freddie Cunningham. Yeah, I've heard Freddie Cunningham. I've never dealt with him personally, but I've heard he's a difficult person to deal with. Okay, Matt says, no, I'm just joking, but he retired this year. Scouse Farm says, Boots all day. You know, it's like the old boxing adage, you're only as good as your last fight. People tend to remember your last performance and forget everything else. But to be fair, Boots has got a habit, he's got a history of boxing reckless. There's only been a few times when he's boxed clean. One of them was the Stanionis fight. Matt says, I think Boots is talented, but once he gets KO'd, I think he's going to decline quick. You know what? I agree with you. KO Kid says, if I need a laugh, I watch your vid on Boogie 2098. Is that still on YouTube or is it only on the Rumble channel? I forget now. That was crazy. Boogie versus Wings of Redemption. Yeah, I agree with you, FIFA. I'd like to see somebody else train Boots, a different philosophy, utilizing some of Boots' boxing skills rather than all this banging it out in the pocket. Shout out to Wade. He says, Hatman, can you tell when someone is a corn addict? I saw some guy today He was so socially awkward and had no confidence. I don't know if it's that. Well, I think that, I guess it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. I reckon it's more likely he was socially awkward before he got into that. And maybe that is compounding it and it's keeping him stagnant so he doesn't get over that addiction. Do you know what I mean? Shout out to Ocean Blue, says that video's a classic. Danny Boy says, I remember that. Faultline says, the Wilder Mark Breland plot video is another classic. People are saying that Bolzienis constantly says, nah, mean, bro. When I first started YouTube, I would say certain words and what have you constantly without realizing it. And then I always used to watch my videos back and critique myself. I'd constantly be umming and ahhing and saying, do you know what I mean? And so on and so forth. It was a conscious decision and a conscious effort to try and minimize doing that. But some people never try to rectify their speech. And obviously, Bolzienis is one of them. FIFA Junior says, I would pick Lidard to beat Bentley. I wonder if that'll be one of the 5v5. Did I read wrong? Or am I remembering wrong? Or is Bentley now a free agent? Matt says, I'm a professional commentator now, and things you need to understand are no ums, no breathing between sentences, and using vocabulary that isn't jargon. Yeah, the ums, at least to me, that was the biggest thing to get rid of out of my speech. And one thing I realized, and I've come to know after the fact that they teach this in broadcasting, is that it's better to pause and go silent for a moment than say If you're constantly saying it's off-putting to the audience. So you're better off going silent. And so as I train myself to stop saying all the time, the silences would often be long. But the more I got used to the silences, the shorter they became, if that makes sense. Exactly as Matt said there. Yep, pausing is the key, and if you feel to stutter, you pause. Then he says, binge watch the Muhammad Ali fights in order, absolute legend and GOAT-worthy resume, but it's kind of crazy how many of his fights are boring. Yeah, a lot of his fights are very boring. Ali was a bit of a spoiler, truth be told, in a lot of his fights. He'd be sticking a jab, moving about, mocking the opponent around in the ring, clinching, and a lot of them weren't particularly entertaining to watch. Some of them were, like when he fought Cleveland Williams. the Liston fights. Obviously, when he came back in the 1970s after his hiatus, when he was fighting Joe Frazier and George Foreman and what have you, the Norton fights were decent. But yeah, particularly in his first reign as champion, there were several fights there that were very boring. And even in his second career, if you want to call it that, the second phase of his career, there were a lot of boring fights there as well, but a lot of exciting ones too. He needed the right dance partner, Ali, in order to make an exciting fight. Matt Borgerson says, I went to school for broadcasting and you learn those keys right away. A lot of podcasts on my college radio station. It's a job you have to learn on the go. Wave says, Terry Moana is an Aussie Makhmudov. Terry Moana is a lot better coordinated than Makhmudov, though. I'm not saying you're wrong in terms of how his career will turn out to be. We have to wait and see. I am a little concerned about how slowly they're moving him. It's like, what are they hiding? Given his age, you know? Matt says, honestly, maybe Terry Moana versus Torres. That would make sense, no? I don't think it would make much sense for Torres coming off a KO defeat to go straight in there against another monster puncher. That chin of Torres's is going to plague him his whole career. I'm not sure how they're going to overcome it, to be honest. Somebody suggested Torres maybe drop down to bridgerweight. But bridgerweight is pretty much finished now anyway, isn't it? When's the last time there was a bridgerweight fight? Okay, that was Matt. He says he's the one that suggested bridgerweight. Whose chin is worse, Joshua's or Torres? Maybe Joshua. Joshua's chin is so bad now. The casual expert says, any thoughts on Gradis Kraus? I spoke about Gradis Kraus a few streams ago. To me, he looks decent, but nothing special. His people, Peter Fury, his promoter, Ben Shalom, are talking him up to their high heavens. Ben Shalom is saying he's the best light heavyweight in the world right now. He's going to become undisputed. Okay, that's what a promoter is supposed to do, I guess. Talk him up to that extent. They were saying he's going to smoke Ben Whittaker in a couple of rounds and yada, yada, yada. He's got some talent, but he doesn't look exceptional to me. They keep talking about his incredible punching power. I haven't seen any incredible punching power. I've seen decent punching power, but nothing incredible. And I've watched incredible punches over the years. When Kovalev was on the way up at 175, incredible punching power. Adonis Stevenson, the best one-punch light heavyweight I've seen maybe in the past 20 years, was Adonis Stevenson. For just one punch, out of nowhere explosive power, incredible. To say that Gradis Kraus is this phenomenal puncher, when people make a claim like that, I compare that to a Kovalev, Stevenson, because they're the most recent phenomenal punchers before, let's say, Beterbiev that we've had in the division. So I'm not putting Kraus's power up there like that. The way I assess Gradis Kraus, I said he's like He's like Willie Hutchinson with less fluidity and a bit more power. Somebody in my Element group recently said that Jalalov is looking to enter some other amateur tournament. We can just write him off at this point if that's true. Scouse Farm, not impressed with Kraus. He says, Kraus is garbage, complete garbage. Okay. Don't hold back. Tell us how you really feel. Shout out to Scouse Farm. He completely disagrees with FIFA Junior, who thinks he looks good. Well, I'm not saying that he looks bad, but he just doesn't jump out at me as some kind of exceptional talent. Did I say out of? I should have said out at. Doesn't jump out at me as some kind of exceptional talent the way his team are talking him up to be. Matt Borgerson says, Beterbiev just threw punishment at people. Honestly, the KO against Callum Smith was beyond impressive. Yeah, he bludgeoned Smith. No one has ever beaten Smith like that before. Shout out to GMS Nightmare. He says, can a female boxer beat an untrained 200-pound man? Yes, of course. Depending on the man, yeah. There are plenty of 200-pound men, untrained, who have no athleticism about them, no natural strength, anything. Nerds, you know? Yeah, there are plenty of guys that a professional female boxer could beat. Just randoms, you know? Big up GMS Nightmare. Shout out to Matt, he says, when I saw Beterbiev destroy Callum Smith, nuts. FIFA Junior says, I'm from Scotland and the area Willie Hutchinson is from, they're all like that. Yeah, Willie Hutchinson is very, very cringe. The way he comes across in interviews and what have you. Very, very cringe. It's hard to watch. Scouse Farm says, just look at his amateur record. You can't go from that to splattering Bivol, who is exceptional. Yeah, I looked at his amateur record on one of the previous streams, and I was prompted to do so after watching a Ben Shalom interview where he was talking about how incredible Gradus Kraus was as an amateur. So I got his amateur record up on screen, and he lost nearly half of his amateur fights. I mean, he had quite a lot of them, and he fought in various tournaments and whatnot, but he lost nearly half of them. That's not an amateur record that screams out to me that he's going to be undisputed. You know what I mean? And lost nearly half of his fights. Film Retrospective says, funny you talking last time about the people going on at you for using AI thumbnails. I used 40 seconds of AI footage in a 28-minute documentary. The amount of abuse I got, so I feel you on that. Yeah, it's weird. It's like I use zero AI in my videos, but people were really, I mean, they've cooled off now. But initially they were really upset that I was using AI for my thumbnails. I don't get it. The AI is not part of the videos. What difference does it make? Very strange. FIFA Junior says, can't believe Beterbiev nearly got stopped by Callum Johnson. Yeah, the closest anyone's ever come to doing it. I mean, Callum Johnson could really crack with a left hook, to be fair. Joe Blog says, which YouTube channels would you recommend for boxing technique tutorials? You know, This has really been a pet peeve of mine. I don't really watch boxing tutorials on YouTube, but I do scroll through Instagram, and most of the boxing tutorial pages, in my view, are absolute garbage. Even the really popular ones, they're so garbage. I mean, I guess if you're an absolute beginner and you know nothing about boxing, you might be able to get something from them. But even then, they might be leading you down the wrong path. So there's a guy, just to answer your question, on Instagram. I'm not sure if he's got a YouTube channel, but there's a guy on Instagram who is from Kazakhstan. He's a coach, middle-aged guy, skinny. Now, I'm not saying that this guy's going to teach you every boxing skill that you need, and it's going to be the most comprehensive boxing tutorial page you'll come across. But what I will say is, when it comes to straight punching, throwing hard, crisp, clean, powerful punches that are straight, like a jab and a straight right hand, and some people might think, whoa, that sounds so basic. One of the things about those Eastern European guys is they tend to master the basic punches to a higher degree than British fighters do, which is why they usually beat the living crap out of British fighters. The general ethos in British boxing gyms is to get you to throw loads of punches. Whereas when you look at those old Eastern Bloc, I'm aware that Kazakhstan is in Asia, it's not in Eastern Europe, but the old Eastern Bloc countries, when you see the fighters from there and the trainers from there, the emphasis is not on throwing a million punches, it's on quality over quantity. Because if you can learn to throw extremely high quality punches, you won't need to throw as many of them. So I recommend that guy, that trainer from Kazakhstan. He's a skinny old guy, but the power that he's got on his straight right hand and on his jab is crazy. Trust me, you wouldn't want to get in any kind of fisticuffs with that old man, because he would knock you senseless. All right. So look out for the guy from Kazakhstan. What is his name? Let me turn my other phone on, because I did save a couple of his. Big up, Matt. He says, Frank Gillfeather is legit though. I like him. Yeah, the Scottish granddad is awful. He is awful. And I saw the little beef that he had with the guy from the Northeast whose name I forget, the Olympian. They had some beef over the correct way to throw a right hand. And trust me, the granddad was talking Tony Jeffries, the granddad was talking absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. With Tony Jeffries, I mean, I find it hard to watch Tony Jeffries' videos, to be honest, because it's so geared towards absolute beginners. I'm kind of annoyed by the format. I'm not saying what he's teaching is necessarily wrong, but it's just such a beginner-focused format that I don't really get anything from it. And also, he's not the guy to really teach phenomenal power punching. There is a way to train where you will end up punching an awful lot harder than you ordinarily would. And you're not going to get that, in my experience, from British trainers or British online YouTube coaches. You have to look at the Eastern European guys, some of the old school American guys, not so many of the ones that are around now, but the old school ones. But that, I keep saying Eastern Europe, that Kazakh trainer, whose name I'm going to get up in just a second here, if you want to learn how to throw a right hand hard, watch this guy's videos. Because I'm telling you, that is the way it's done. Because he demonstrates, like, that old man hits so damn hard, it's crazy. He's a skinny old Kazakh dude, but you can see when he hits the bag, the snap on the shot, He's bending his knees, he's twisted. The kinetic chain, everything is just perfect. Especially if you're like a tall, lanky type of boxer, he's the perfect trainer to really study and get something from as far as improving punching power and the basic fundamentals of straight punching. Matt says, gotta go to Mexico. Well, the thing about Mexicans is that some of them punch really hard, but most of them don't. Most of them go for volume rather than big power punching. There are certain Mexicans that are more focused on loading up and landing huge shots, whereas the majority of them throw all these constant punches. Really depends on your body type, right? As far as which is going to suit you and serve you better. But just give me a moment. I want to get the name of this guy up on screen for you so you can check out his channel. Will I get it up on screen? Well, I can read it out. I can just find one of his posts. Yeah, here we go. So the guy's name is Yuri Chernobrovkin. Yuri Chernobrovkin. That's his name. He's on Instagram. He's got 656,000 followers. He's from Kazakhstan. I don't think he speaks any English on his channel, but he don't need to speak any English on his channel. Just do what he does. Copy what he's doing. And just look at the power that old man's got. I say an old man, he might only be in his 40s or 50s, but the straight punching is a thing of beauty from this old man. And he's teaching you how to do it, the kinetic chain and everything. And focusing on the quality. Not the terribly annoying thing that so many British trainers do, where they want you to throw 1,000,000 punches around. You're not going to develop the quality on your punches if you're throwing that many damn shots. Slow it all down and land the quality first. Develop the quality first. Then you can up the volume once the quality is down pat. But big up Richard for the super chat. He says, in your opinion, what are the top 3 fundamentals in boxing for beginners? Big up Hatman, been watching you for time now. The top 3 fundamentals are footwork. Learning the correct footwork takes care of most problems. You know, if you watch most high-level professionals, especially the world champions, the really good fighters, most of the time, the footwork takes care of avoiding punches more so than having to block or duck. Just having your feet in the right position, moving your feet in the right direction or at the right time can take away the other guy's offense, at least to some extent. Obviously, as you go up through the levels, the guys become more sophisticated and faster generally, and they can find ways to counteract what you're doing with your footwork. But footwork is very, very key for a beginner. Learning correct footwork, correct balance. That's your base. Everything comes off that. Your defense comes off your footwork. Your power, everything is off your footwork. Learning correct footwork and balance. Then would come your guard, upper body movement and stuff like that. And then after that, as I mentioned earlier on, developing a really good jab. Because when you're starting off, I've always had the philosophy that you need to learn how to not get hit first, become skilled at not getting hit, and then from that solid foundation, you can start to develop an offense. So big up Richard Fowl for the super chat. Much appreciated, sir. Let me look up this Frank Gilfeather guy that Matt Borgerson endorsed here. Someone says the trainer has gunshot sound packs. I'm telling you, that Yuri guy can crack. He can proper crack. And from my own personal experience, Eastern European guys in the gym tend to train quality over quantity. Danny says, Benavidez would butcher you if you tried to slow down your punches and go for power. So, what I'm talking about, Danny, is literally exactly what Beterbiev has been doing his whole career. What I'm talking about is exactly what Golovkin was doing his whole career. These are not high volume guys. These are guys who have learned how to punch so correctly, and they've refined their kinetic chain and their core strength to such an extent, they don't need to throw a gazillion punches. They don't need to. The other guy is going to throw a gazillion. They only need to hit you with a couple, and you're in all sorts of trouble. That, in my experience, is more effective than these British coaches that teach you volume, 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 volume. That's not to say that any style is going to be invincible. This ain't some old school 1970s or 80s kung fu movie with some invincible style. But more often than not, in my experience, quality will trump quantity. Now, some guys have got quality and quantity. But my point is, from a training perspective, learn how to punch with quality first. You see, if you don't do that, and you get caught up in what these British coaches typically tell you to do, volume, 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 then you are basically never going to be able to match somebody when you come up against them that has vastly superior quality. You won't be able to. It's not just about power, Danny. It's about, you look at Beterbiev, for example. Yes, he's powerful, but he's accurate. He's got very little wind up on his punches. So you're completely overlooking what I'm describing here. He's got very little wind up on his punches. Because there's no wind up, there's no tell, it's hard to know when the shot's coming. Beterbiev doesn't look like a guy that has really fast hands. But when you're in there with him, the shots travel such a short distance, and there's so little tell in his body because he's refined his kinetic chain to such an extent. It compensates for the lack of velocity on the shots. Same with Golovkin. Didn't look like a fast-handed guy. But because he refined his technique to such an extent, it compensated for not being that quick. But obviously there are plenty of guys, I mean, that Yuri guy, the trainer, his right hand's got plenty of speed on it. I'm just saying quality over quantity. If you line up the best guys from the old Eastern Bloc versus the best guys from Britain, come on. The Eastern Bloc guys are going to muller them. In fact, the Eastern Bloc guys, the best ones, are going to muller most of the American fighters as well. And you've actually got it the other way around, Danny. You say, I bet you can't land those shots in a real boxing match. You absolutely can. When you train to land single quality shots rather than massive flurries, you're more likely to land those shots than the guy that's throwing all the flurries. The guy that's throwing the 10-punch combinations, unless you are someone like a Benavidez, you're not going to land those shots. It's not realistic. How often at top level do guys manage to come out? You know, I remember when David Haye was training to fight Vladimir Klitschko. And Haye was throwing all these fast combinations on the pads and this, that, and the other. And I think it was Ingram Jones who said after the fight, where were those fast combinations from David Haye against Klitschko? And I was like, bro, Klitschko, with his superior technique and size and everything, didn't allow David Haye to get into a position where he could unload combinations like that. That's what I'm talking about. All those I mean, look at Chris Eubank Jr. He throws these gazillion punch combinations in the gym. But whenever he's been in there against a top tier fighter, he can't land those shots. It's better to learn quality punching than throwing a gazillion punches, 25 punch combinations, etc. For most people, it's going to be better to learn how to land good quality shots, accurate, refining the kinetic chain so there's very little tell on the punch. 3 or 4 good quality shots will trump a 20 punch combination in most cases. Again, Danny, there's no one size fits all thing. Benavidez is an exception. He's a guy that throws a lot of punches and it's very effective for him. I'm saying that most guys who throw a lot of shots are not going to be anything like Benavidez. Benavidez right now is one of my favorite fighters. I love the way he fights. But with Benavidez, it isn't just the fact he throws a lot of shots and he's got very fast hands. It's the fact that he's so creative. And this is another thing I talk about with Benavidez. He is so creative with his punch sequences. Most fighters, when they throw a left hook at you, you know a right hand is coming. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. That's the pattern with most fighters when they open up. One of the things I've noticed with not all, but many of the greatest punchers of all time is they throw unusual punch sequences. And that's what catches you off guard. And that's what Benavidez is like. He won't throw left, right, left, right. He'll throw left, 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 right, left, uppercut. You know, he'll throw weird punch sequences, and that's what catches you off guard, as I say. It's the weird punch sequences because you're so used to being in there with guys who throw left, right, left, right, left, right. That's what you're used to defending, you know? So instinctively, your arm will go up after they've landed a left on your guard. You know, a right is coming, so your left glove is going to go up. But a Benavidez will be like, no, I'm going to throw 8 left hooks in a row. How about that? I'll throw 8 left hooks. I'll throw 3 up top, 3 to the body, then 2 left uppercuts. He just throws strange punch sequences that surprise the opponent. And that's one of the keys to his success. And he's also very relaxed, Benavidez, when he throws his shots. You know, Chris Eubank Sr., long before Benavidez beat Gilberto Ramirez, I think it was when Benavidez was still at 168, or it might have been when he just moved up to 175. Excuse me, when he just moved up to 175. Chris Eubank Sr. on his channel, you know when he used to do that question and answer session thing, people would drop voice notes and he'd answer the voice note. One guy asked him, who's the best pound for pound fighter in the world right now? And he didn't say Usyk, he didn't say Crawford, he didn't say Canelo, or any of the guys that were in contention for that spot at the time. He said David Benavidez. That's what Eubank Sr. said. And a lot of people were kind of taken aback by it. What? Benavidez? What's he on about? And Eubank Sr. said, I know what I'm looking at. And that guy is the best fighter in boxing right now. Now, I'm not saying he's necessarily right, because pound for pound is an abstract concept. That's why I don't tend to get into it. But given what Benavidez has done since, it has helped to legitimize Eubank Sr.'s opinion about him. Russ B says some of the top fighters now and before are volume punchers, some aren't, some are power punchers, some aren't. There's no correct style, depends on who you are and your opponent's best, are varied. Well, of course, there's no one size fits all style. But if you look at the countries and the regions that have had a disproportionate amount of success, it's a good idea to incorporate what they're doing as opposed to other regions that don't have as much success. I'm talking about at the elite level. And those former Eastern Bloc countries have a disproportionately high amount of success. Many of the best amateurs from the former Eastern Bloc, they never even turned pro. So we're only getting a fraction of the talent that actually comes out of there on our television screens. Do you know what I mean? So I'm somebody that, having boxed amateur myself, having trained with many different people from different parts of the world, being in the gym with Eastern European guys, I'm always far more impressed by them than most of the British amateurs and professionals that I've seen up close in the gym and trained with and sparred and what have you. There was a guy, I spoke about this previously, big up Lord McCormick for the super chase. His question in chat, respect and love from your UK family. Big up Lord McCormick. Let me look for his question. Okay, here we go. Big up Lord McCormick. He says, yes, Hatman, I'm currently training my son, 13 years old, 6'2", 209 pounds. He hits hard and knows the basic 1, 2, 3, 4 jab, right hook, jab, right, left hook, and uppercut. But his feet are slow. Also, have you seen Odyssey? I have 4 times, I rate it. So 13 years old and 6'2", 209 pounds. He's a big boy. He's learned the basics. His feet are slow. One of the best things to do if you have slow feet is to use the old school ankle weights and just practice moving around the ring. You need to be in a ring on a canvas. And that will build up the muscles in your calves and those other muscles in your legs. And if you do that for several weeks, especially when he's young like that and he's still growing, the foot speed will improve quite quick. But you have to put the work in. You have to do the kind of tedious moving around in the ring, shadow boxing with those ankle weights on. And some kids don't want to do that. They want to get out there punching and hitting stuff and hitting pads and bags and sparring. It's the little details like that that will take you so far. It's like when I recommend people do a lot of shadow boxing. People don't find shadow boxing particularly interesting, but I'm telling you, if you do shadow boxing the right way, it can benefit you so much. In fact, so much more than other more popular training techniques, right? So big up Lord McCormick. And as far as the Odyssey, yes, I have seen it and I rate it too. I thought it was one of Christopher Nolan's better movies, to be honest. I do intend to see it again. Maybe I'll see it tomorrow again. I did like it. We got Lord McCormick for the super chat every time. Much respect and love. He says, Lord McCormick says he's a unit, but Pluds just won't move his feet. Respect, brother, for the answer. Well, Benavidez is a special talent because I didn't actually realize until relatively recently that Benavidez didn't have many amateur fights. Which means he's very, very gifted. To be as good as he is without many amateur fights, that's a very gifted individual. Like Hatman. Hatman didn't have that many amateur fights, although they were at a high level as a junior. I said many, Danny. I didn't say any. I said he didn't have many amateur fights. The box says he was in the gym sparring champions at a young age instead. Black Dynamite says, Twitter told me Beterbiev is fighting tonight. But yeah, getting back to what I was saying a few minutes ago. The last time I was in a gym, or one of the last times I was in a gym in the UK, there was an Eastern European kid who to me looked like he was actually from that Caucasus region where Beterbiev and Khabib and all those guys come from. That's what he looked like to me phenotypically. Like one of those guys. And normally when I'm in the gym and I'm hitting the bag, anyone who's new in that gym, who hasn't been there before, they hear me hitting the bag and they always want to come and have a look because they ain't heard punches like that before. Well, this guy, this is Eastern European guy who must have only been, I don't know, a middleweight at most. He was the only person that I ever saw in the gym, in that particular gym, who would hit the bag like I hit the bag. Not as hard as I was hitting it, but very, very hard for his size. And he would focus on quality, not quantity. Now, I always had fast hands, so I would throw fast combinations and mix it up here and there. Certain bag sessions, I would focus on combination punching and being as quick as possible. And I always would focus on throwing my punches fast because I was always a fast switch guy. But I would go through certain sessions where rather than throwing combinations, I would just try to refine my power punches. So I'd throw the straight right hand over and over and over and over and over again, as fast and snappy, as hard as possible. I would channel my inner Tommy Hearns. I would adjust my legs. I'd get down in my stance, make sure the knees are bent, make sure I'm pivoting on the ball of the right foot when I'm twisting through the punch. And I would do that over and over and over again, an hour or an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours, working on one particular punch. Yes, it's maniacal, but that's how you end up with an elite level shot. You have to do maniacal stuff like that. The coaches don't want you doing that. Oh, why are you not throwing the other shots? Come in the other room and do some skipping. I'm ignoring all that. All right? I'll do skipping another time or at home or wherever. And that Eastern European guy who'd had a bunch of amateur fights as I understood it, we looked at each other because he was training next to me and we understood that we were doing things different to the typical UK amateur coaches. Throw a million shots, uppercut, hook, and all that nonsense. When they put him in the ring sparring, right, with the other kids in or around his weight, it was a massacre. The other guys have been taught to throw a gazillion punches around, especially amateur boxing, right? It's only 3 rounds. This guy was coming in like flipping Golovkin. It was coming in like damn Golovkin. English Rob doesn't like the fact that I can actually punch. Don't be intimidated, bro. What as Shannon Briggs used to say, don't be scared, I'm just in shape. Just in shape, that's all. Don't be scared. Wave says, who made that rumor of you and David Haye? I remember it vividly. Was it during the Fury versus Haye build? I can't remember who made the rumor. Actually, it might have been Kieran. Because I kept criticizing David Haye for avoiding the Klitschko's for as long as he did. And yeah, I think Kieran came up with some silly, Kieran's a troll, he's a funny guy. He's in my Element group. Big up Kieran. But he made up some rumor that David Haye had knocked me out in the gym or he'd stolen my girlfriend or some nonsense like that. I was never in the gym with David Haye. I trained at Fitzroy Lodge for a while, but David Haye was gone by then. When I was at that gym, there was Dominic Akinlade, there was Anthony Small, Leon Williams, there was that half Jamaican, half Turkish kid. God, what's his name? Amit Patterson, he was there. There was even, why is his name escaping me? The albino guy. What's his name? Terry. Some of you guys might know Terry. Yeah, he was there at the same time as well. Yes, Terry was there. Shout out to Andrew Morris for the super chat. He says, should more be done to try and increase the number of competitive amateurs to continue into the late 20s and 30s? At both novice and experienced levels? Not for me. I think these guys are staying amateur for too long, to be honest. Because amateur boxing and pro boxing are different sports. There's a different emphasis in amateur boxing compared to professional boxing. KO Kid says, off the bed, so I'm well rested for Armored Combat tomorrow. I think I've seen the Armored Combat thing. It's quite bizarre, so good luck. Shout out to 1-1. But getting back to Andrew Morris's question, I think a lot of these guys stay amateur for too long and they leave their best years in the amateurs. Why have we, one of the reasons that Atama is making so many headlines is because he's doing what he's doing at such a young age. But back in the 70s, even the 80s, it wasn't that unusual. to see, let's say, heavyweight champions in their early or mid-20s. Nowadays, these guys are staying amateur for so long that they really miss their athletic peak. So I'd like to see guys, I mean, the ideal thing is you start boxing at a very young age as a child. You have plenty of amateur fights through your teen years. And by the time you hit your late teens, early 20s, you're ready to turn pro. Ideal scenario. Yeah, I agree, Telstar. You could argue that Lomachenko left his best years in the amateurs. A more recent example, which is still ongoing, is Bakir Jalilov. Like, what in the world is this guy playing at? I've explained before, on many occasions, one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, and it isn't the case for all fighters from every region of the world, but in Britain and in Western countries, one of the reasons that some of these guys stay amateur for so long is if there's any chance of them winning, medaling at the Olympics, etc. They tend to stay amateur to do that first because they know they'll then get a lucrative professional contract. If you try and turn pro without some serious amateur credentials, in most cases, you're going to be on the small hall circuit. And it's tough on a small hall circuit, Minimal money. Often have to pay to get on the card. You're paying the opponent, etc. Also, something was pointed out. I know I've been laboring this particular point regarding Atama. I don't think Atama should be fighting for a heavyweight title now because I just think it's unnecessary. He's had so few rounds as a pro. Gareth A. Davis, on an interview that he did, it might have been with the Stomping Ground earlier on today, he actually had the stats for the number of rounds Atama has boxed compared to the number of rounds Mike Tyson had boxed prior to challenging Trevor Berbick. And Mike Tyson literally boxed about 3 times the number of rounds that Atama has prior to their first title challenge. And for my money, Atama's fighting a tougher opponent than Mike Tyson fought. That's not to say I don't expect Atama to beat Hrgovic, I do. I just don't see the reason to put him in a world title fight now after 14 fights. The Hrgovic fight originally wasn't going to be a world title fight. If it was me, I would have kept it that way. Have him fight Hrgovic. You come through that. Let's see how he performs. Does he go rounds or whatever? Then maybe go 10 or 12 rounds a couple more times. Then you stick him in a world title fight if he passes those tests. Because Mike Tyson passed some tests before he challenged Berbick. He'd been the full 10 rounds twice. He'd been nearly 10 rounds another time against Revolta. He'd been tested in fights. Quick Tillis really tested him. That was a relatively close fight. Mike Tyson talked after that fight about how physically taxing it was. He said that was the first time in a pro fight, at least, he'd been really hit with body punches. And after the fight, his body was absolute murder because he'd been getting hit with so many body shots until he could punch. But Mike Tyson had to come through awkward opponents, tests, and what have you. Even for a few rounds at least, Jesse Ferguson was a little awkward for him. Mitch Green had an iron jaw. So Tyson came through a fight against an opponent that could take his power. An opponent who he really couldn't intimidate with his power. But obviously, Mitch Green wasn't much of a puncher. Extremely crazy, though. Danny says Hatman has been pro for nearly 4 years. That's irrelevant, Danny. The amount of time you've been pro is no substitute for the number of fights you've had. You can be pro for 10 years. If you only had 14 fights, you're not going to have progressed to the same extent as a guy who's been pro 5 years, but he's had 30 fights. There is no substitute for actual fight experience against quality opposition. Well, never mind about he's been pro 4 years. He hasn't fought enough. 14 fights. It's nowhere near enough. He really, over 4 years, should have had minimum 20 fights. Been quite disappointing how inactive he's been. Maybe it's a sign of the times that they want to fast track these guys to become pay-per-view fighters as quickly as possible because money, you know? Danny says it's both fights and years. No, Danny. The amount that the years contribute is tiny compared to the fights. You will not progress anywhere near as much if you're just training in the gym and sparring as compared to actually getting in there and fighting. Because it isn't just about fitness in the gym and all that kind of stuff. It's about being able to perform in a stressful situation. And you can't replicate the stress of a professional fight in the gym. You just can't. For one, there's the crowd. For two, there's no headgear, there's small gloves. The shots hurt a lot more, they affect you more. And in the gym, you can have an off day, not do well in sparring, come back the next day and do well. Whereas in a fight, no, it's all on the night. So if you don't feel well, you need to find a way to get the job done and to win regardless. Most fighters will tell you they never go into the ring 100%. But some guys just have a way of pushing through the pain barrier and the fatigue barrier and delivering a performance regardless. And when you've done that a few times, it strengthens your mind, it strengthens your resolve, it gives you more confidence, knowing what you can come through, knowing what you can do, irrespective of how you feel. This is why there is no substitute for actual fight experience. Never mind all this sparring and all this stuff. You need to actually be in the ring fighting. And Hatman's only had 14 fights in 4 years. That's really poor. Big up Shay Turnbull for the super chat. Much appreciated, sir. He says, did you manage to keep boxing and sparring regularly while you were building your business? Salute, Hatman. So I stopped boxing competitively before I started my business. In fact, the two things kind of coincided. Right when I stopped boxing competitively, not long after that is when I started my business. Now, there was a period when I was in a position to have a few more amateur fights, and I got myself into pretty damn good shape. And I wanted to have some more amateur fights. Somebody earlier on in the live chat spoke about how they would still get the itch. And right when literally the coach at the gym and everybody was looking to match me, you know what happened? The Rona happened. I was like, no way. No flipping way. Right when I geared up, I was in great shape. I was sparring. I was doing this, that, and the other. I wanted to have a few more fights because they'd raised the age, the limit that you could box amateur in the UK to 40. So before I hit that limit, I was like, let me have a few fights. My final year ever being able to box as an amateur. And that's when Rona hit and it shut me down. I was so pissed. Oh my God. Talk about Sod's Law. Exactly, Scouts Farm. So YL says, why do fighters have so few fights per year in this day and age? I think it's a simple case of promoters trying to protect their investment. I think that's what it is. They see a fighter as an investment. They understand that boxing is a sport which will damage the fighter. They want to limit the amount of damage and maximize the amount of revenue. Even if that, in some cases, hinders the fighter's development. They're thinking about it from a business perspective. They're thinking, let's not do as much development in the ring. Let's do more development in the gym. Let's send him around to all the best gyms in the world and spar the best fighters and what have you, and limit the amount of development they're actually doing in real fights. I think it's just that, for the most part. Active Learner says, I get why you say some life paths just are not open to people. Yeah, it's frustrating, but it is what it is. You got to let it go. H. Sully says, no more 40-year-old excuses for you. You're in Africa now. In Africa, where in most countries there is little to no regard for health and safety. You know, I don't know what the stats are, but I would suspect that Africa is up there as far as regions in the world that has the most in-the-ring fatalities. You think these commissions out here have anything like brain scan? I'm not talking about amateur boxing there, I'm talking about pro boxing, obviously. Think they have anything like brain scans? And some of them do, but I tell you, a lot of them don't. Most of them, I would imagine, don't. Active Learner says, I'd love to have a few amateur fights, but I feel like I need to focus on money, career. Feels like a conflict of interest. Yeah, it's, as I said earlier, well, as somebody alluded to there, regarding life path, which is something I've spoken about many times. Moses Itama, I remember reading some comments, and I mentioned this in a YouTube video at the time. Moses Itama made the conscious decision to basically forget about education. I think when he was about 15 or 16. He said, I'm not even going to focus on education now. Forget about it. I'm going to focus 100% on boxing. And there were some people in the comment section of the interview clip where he said that were criticizing him. Oh, what an idiot. What an idiot. You need your education to fall back on. What an idiot. And I think I left a comment, or maybe I just replied in the video, and I said, no, it's you guys who are the idiots. In order to, if you have that kind of talent and you know it, it's not something you think, it's something you know deep in your soul. And obviously you're getting the results in the amateur fights. You're doing extraordinary things in the gym when you're just a teenager against grown men, world champions, world level cruiserweights and heavyweights. You know that you're a prodigy. At that stage, of course, you go all in with the boxing and you sack off the education. Of course you do. Is it a gamble? Yes, it's a gamble, but guess what's a gamble also? Is trying to balance the education with the boxing. That's a gamble too. And the payoff is nowhere near as great. If you try to juggle those things, the boxing is inevitably going to suffer. And what's the upside? You get to have a degree and do what with it exactly? Is that going to take you anywhere near as far commercially, financially, as boxing can take you when you've got that kind of talent? Obviously not. So Itama knew from a relatively young age the path that was being opened up for him in life. And he took the path. And it was a wise choice. A very wise choice. Everything in life is a gamble. But it's about making the best, most sensible gamble. He did the right thing. I mean, even now, Itama's made money that he almost certainly wouldn't have made had he tried to juggle boxing and education. The box says, I wouldn't call him an idiot, but it is good to have a backup plan. You could always get a serious injury. In this life, in situations like that, you can't do both. That's the point I'm making. You can't do both. If you try to go down the serious further education route at the same time as boxing, your boxing is going to suffer. That's not a backup. That's actually a hindrance to your main path. The upside for doing the education is far less than the upside for going and doing the boxing by itself and sacking off the education. Is it a gamble? Yeah, it's a gamble. Anything can happen in boxing, but when you're that talented, the odds are in your favor. Yeah, you could get an injury, you could get badly hurt, could end up crippled. Anything could happen, but when you're that talented, the odds are in your favor. Much better to focus on that, sack off all the education. Big up George the Last Dragon. He says, Holyfield versus Shaver's power versus Foreman with Jones's speed. Holyfield with Shaver's power versus Foreman with Jones's speed. What a bizarre question. I can't even imagine that. Holyfield with Shaver's power or Foreman with Jones's speed? I mean, I'd probably go Foreman with Jones's speed. Then he says, doesn't this contradict his "I'm bored of boxing" claims? I think people are just planting excuses just in case he loses. Of course people are not planting excuses just in case he loses, because that's an alarming thing for any fighter to say at that age. And that's something that Hrgović rightly pounced on and brought up at the face-off. Why did you say you were bored of boxing before you hooked up with Ben Davison? You know, Hrgović pounced on it. And Hatman was uncomfortable when Hrgović pounced on it. He was annoyed by it. Hatman, the way he's spoken about boxing in interviews, he sees it as a job. Rather than a passion, he sees it as a job that he has got talent for, something he's good at. And so he made the conscious decision to go the boxing route rather than going and trying to balance school with boxing. To him, it was more logical to go the boxing thing because he's like, you know what, I'm good at this. I can make money doing this. This is going to be a better career path for me. But there's a difference between that and being passionate about it. There have been fighters in the past. Dwyer did a video some weeks ago talking about Sugar Ray Robinson. Ray Robinson, for him, his first love was dancing and music. He found out he was good at boxing, but that's not what he ultimately wanted to do. But this is going back to life paths. Ray Robinson's first love may have been dance or music, but that life path wasn't open for him. It's funny how life works like that, isn't it? He loved dance, he loved music, he loved all that kind of stuff. But life said, oh no, you don't. You're going to do this boxing thing. That's the direction you're going in. You're going to be beating people up and doing those kind of... That's what you'll be doing in life. You won't be doing any of this dancing stuff. He tried it once he became successful as a boxer. He tried the entertainment stuff. It flopped. So sometimes what you love and what you're good at are two different things. And you have to make the conscious decision to go with what you're good at rather than what you love. Life has decided that a particular path is open for you and another one is not. Big up Adam Fawkes for the super chat. He says, Uncle Albert or Granddad? You know what? Both were great characters. I'll probably say Uncle Albert, but Granddad was great too. That's a hard pick. I'll go with Uncle Albert. One of the differences between Uncle Albert and Granddad is Granddad was more emotionally manipulative. That's the kind of character he was. Uncle Albert was just foolish. He was kind of an innocent character, but foolish. Whereas Granddad was emotionally manipulative. He'd always try and tug on the heartstrings, especially with Del Boy. Well, I just explained it, Danny. He's saying he sacked off school to pursue boxing because he could see a future in it. If he's a schoolboy and he's piecing up Joe Joyce and Lawrence Okolie and all these guys when he's just 15 years old, logically he's going to think, well, this is a better path than boxing. This is a better path than education. It's logical, isn't it? Doesn't mean he loves boxing, but he's found he's good at it, so he's like, I better pursue this. As far as Parker KOing him in sparring, I've got no idea about that. So Sharp says, Usyk has a master's in psychology and law while pursuing boxing. Yeah, but he got those qualifications a couple of years ago. He didn't get those qualifications when he was a young man having to fight multiple times a year. He got those qualifications, I think, in the past 6 years, when he's fighting twice a year, when he's got loads of downtime in between training camps. Look it up. Usyk didn't get the masters and all of that stuff when he was in his teens or 20s. That was when he was in his 30s. When he was young, he dedicated himself to boxing. Because when you're young, you have to fight a lot. Especially as an amateur, you'll be fighting all the time. Sparring all the time. You'll literally be in the gym every damn day. There just isn't the time to be doing degrees and all that kind of stuff if you go hard in the paint. You're just not going to have the time to do it. It's going to distract your mind. You have to be 100% focused on the boxing. And so Usyk was. Either that or you'll have to take some time out. A couple of years or whatever, 3 years to do your degree, then go back to boxing after that. But you might have lost a step or 2 or 3 by then. Life in general is about trade-offs. The people who try and juggle too many plates usually won't get anywhere. It's about gambles and trade-offs. You can't have everything in this life. Sharp Motto says, studying and getting degrees whilst becoming heavyweight undisputed is pretty amazing nonetheless. But there's a reason why he did it at that stage of his career and not earlier on. Because he had way more time on his hands. Fighting twice a year or once a year, you know? What's he going to do for the rest of the year? He can study. Danny says, do you think the stranger and weirder side of AJ will be on show once he retires from the sport? Well, are you saying that AJ isn't strange and weird enough as it is? Do you reckon it's going to get even more weird once he retires? I don't know, man. AJ is a very, very strange character. Talks strange, acts strange. Scouse Farm says, is AJ a clone? In a recent live stream, I was talking about certain concepts that exist in Eastern spiritual traditions, such as reincarnate souls. The idea that you reincarnate over and over again, like Groundhog Day. New souls are naive in the world. Everyone knows the saying that someone is an old soul, even when they're young, they're an old soul. And then you get new souls. People who are, as I say, naive in the world, they're like babies, even as adults. Now, if there's any truth to that idea, maybe that's what AJ is. Maybe he's just a new soul that doesn't have a lot of soul memory, and he's fumbling through life like a toddler in the dark, you know? Because he seems to lack intuition. Maybe people who are older souls have greater intuition because they've been here many times before. UTV says there is no truth to it, so there we go. How do you know? That's your opinion. But you're stating it as if it's a fact. You don't know that. None of us know that. None of us know what happens when you die. We're all going to find out, though. Danny says, think of a 40-year-old retired AJ giving interviews ringside. Is AJ even going to hang around the boxing media like that? I don't know. He's such a awkward guy on the microphone, and I don't know. He's a stakeholder in Matchroom, though, isn't he? He's got some kind of shares or whatever in the company, or stake in the company. Lord McCormick says, the up and down thing Moses does with his lead is becoming cliche, and at some point, someone will punch as he does this, and he'll find out. Well, that's what Duke McKenzie believes as well. When Atama's fainting up and down with the right hand, someone's going to punish him for it at some stage. They might do. But currently he's so fast that I suspect anyone who tries will end up being punished for trying rather than Atama being punished. D-Man says, I have a sad feeling it's just blackness and empty space. Well, if it's oblivion, then you got nothing to worry about. The only time there's reason to worry is if it isn't oblivion. If it's oblivion, then you'll be gone, you won't know anything, you won't know any better, and that's it. Nothing to worry about. Eternal sleep without the dreams. And none of us know what happens when we die. Everyone's just guessing. That's the truth. When I talk about death and truth, the truth is everyone is just guessing regarding what happens when we die. Everyone is guessing. Scientists are guessing. Religious people are guessing. Atheists are guessing. Everyone's guessing. Let's not pretend that anyone actually knows. The only people that could speak on it with any kind of insight at all would be people that have had near-death experiences. The box says, I suspect Hatman's style won't age well like Tyson. Shout out to the box for the super chat. I think Hatman's style is more conducive to a long career because he's more versatile than Tyson. But he's also a fast twitch guy. And relying on fast twitch and reflexes and explosiveness has a relatively short shelf life. So he'll need to adjust and become more defensively responsible, probably have less volume, and be a lot more tactical once he reaches into his, let's say, 30s. If he's still boxing by then. So YLA was recommending The Secret Doctrine by Madame Blavatsky. You know, my view on Blavatsky has always been that she was a grifter. Not that everything in her writings and teachings was BS, but a lot of it was, in my opinion. I think Blavatsky was a bit of a grifter. And, you know, Blavatsky claimed to have lived in all these different parts of the world and studied the spiritual teachings of all these different cultures. If you actually look into her background, the evidence that she actually went to all these places that she claimed to have went to is virtually non-existent. That's why I say I reckon she was a grifter. Of course, back then it was much more difficult to disprove that someone had been these places, etc., than it is today. I mean, she was a colorful character, Blavatsky. Yeah? Very colorful character, but all right, peeps, gonna shut this stream down. I would like to thank each and every one of you for joining the conversation. And I'd like to give a special shout out to those who donated via Super Chat. They were Matt Borgerson, Debyaka, GMS Nightmare, FIFA Junior, KO Kid Boxing, Richard Fowle, Lord McCormick, Andrew Morris, Shay Turnbull, George the Last Dragon, and The Box. So much appreciated to those of you who donated via Super Chat. Big up everyone else. Until next time. You guys take care, be good. I'll catch you on the other side. I'm out.